So again, welcome. Thank you all for being here. As I said, my name is Harold Mock. I'm the director of Georgia College's leadership programs, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our Usery Forum on Leadership. This afternoon, we have the pleasure of hosting the Honorable Steve Jones, Senior United States District Judge for the United States District Court for the Northern District of Georgia. Before we begin our forum, I must say that this event is being recorded. By participating in our forum, you are consenting to being recorded. And if you would prefer to view the recording instead of participating, please leave this meeting and email us at leadership.programs@gcsu.edu. As I said, we're honored to welcome Judge Jones to Milledgeville and to Georgia College. Jane Kidd will introduce Judge Jones momentarily, but allow me briefly to say a few words about this event. The Usery Forum on Leadership is Georgia College's presentation discussion series on leadership for the public good. The forum honors the memory of the 15th U.S. Secretary of Labor, W.J. Usery, Jr. This series is made possible through the generosity of Mr. and Mrs. Melvin and Elise Usery. Secretary Usery, who you see there on the screen, began his career as a machinist at the naval shipyards in Brunswick during the Second World War, and he enlisted in the United States Navy and became an underwater welder on a repair ship in the Pacific War. He built a long and storied career in service to his country and ultimately negotiated some of the most difficult labor disputes of the 20th century. As I said, this forum honors his memory. Secretary Usery had a unique ability to bring people together in the name of ideas and causes bigger than themselves. And that's precisely what we honor and celebrate this evening, embodied in our distinguished presenter. On the screen there, you'll see a message from Secretary Usery's son, Melvin, who in particular said that to you students, I challenge you to learn from the past, incorporate innovative techniques and technology, be an active listener while holding fast to your values. You can learn and you can make a difference. On that note, I would like to acknowledge a few of our special guests who are with us this afternoon. Mrs. Lillian Kinsey, who is an educator and civic leader in Clark County, and she is the wife of Judge Jones. Mrs. Jane Kidd, who is our Alex Gregory Distinguished Fellow and Leader in Residence, as well as Dr. Jeannie Snyder-Chamberlain, previously our Leader in Residence and a trustee. Joining us online is Stan Wilson, also a trustee, and here are Mr. and Mrs. Tom and Sandra Rossiter, members of our Leadership Advisory Board. We're also joined by many guests online, including our alumni from across Georgia and across the country. So whether you are a Bobcat or a Colonial or a Jesse, we want to welcome you back to Georgia College this afternoon, and we hope that our conversation with Judge Jones will remind you precisely of why we love Georgia College so much. That is, we have the opportunity to ask and answer big questions and to share in a commitment to something greater than ourselves. If you're joining us online, we will hope to get the opportunity to host you on campus soon. Most of all, students, I am glad that you all are here. I'm glad that you will learn about leadership from so distinguished a practitioner. I want to encourage you to pull out your phones right now and open up Instagram and LinkedIn and follow us at Lead Creatively. Especially you students, please follow us at Lead Creatively. If there's anything that we discuss here tonight that you would like to put on social media, please do so using the hashtag #ForThePublicGood. And again, connect with us on Lead Creatively. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, put your phones away and put them on silent so that we can be sure to hear what Judge Jones has to say. But one of the most important elements of this event is that we get to hear from you. So we ask that you ask good questions of our presenter. There on the table in front of you are some note cards where you can jot down ideas, things perhaps that you would like to ask our distinguished presenter. Very quickly, because you all are a captive audience, I want to remind you that Georgia College provides all of you, students, faculty, and staff, a free subscription to the New York Times. I imagine there's very little that we will discuss this afternoon that would not be enriched by a regular reading of the New York Times. This is sponsored, made available to you by the American Democracy Project and the Office of the Provost. So please, it took me about 60 seconds to do it, and you guys are younger and cooler than I am. I bet you could do it in 30 seconds. Go to accessnyt.com, select Georgia College from the drop-down menu, and activate your subscription to the New York Times. I also want to remind you that if the New York Times is maybe not the newspaper of choice for you, and you find that you want to read some other things, all of these periodicals are either laying in the floor in my office or on the periodical shelf in Russell Library. If you have not yet made a habit of reading the news every day, I will make you a blanket promise. Anytime you come to my office in the Carl Vinson House, we will learn how to read a newspaper together with one of these, the New York Times or the newspaper of your choice. With that, again, I want to thank you for joining us. I will now ask my colleague, Mrs. Jane Kidd, to provide an introduction to our distinguished presenter. Please join me in thanking Mrs. Jane Kidd.
Well, this is an honor for me. I have known Judge Jones for a long time, and I promised some students that I would say this because I'd already said it to them. But the first time I ever heard about him, my sister was working for social services and had run into him, and she said, "I just love that skinny little Steve Jones." And he was a assistant DA then and worked in the courts. And that's exactly what I love about Steve. He is so approachable and so engaging and fun, and he has great manners. He reminds me of Dr. Mock. He makes everybody feel comfortable, and he has great manners. So it's a real honor. And I really am not going to read all of this, but he has done a lot. He is Senior United States District Court Judge. He was appointed by former President Barack Obama in 2011. And in this role, he presides over cases that involve the United States government, the United States Constitution, federal laws, controversies between citizens of different states, and other matters. He holds a bachelor's degree in management from UGA and a Juris Doctor degree. He's a lawyer from UGA too. Prior to his nomination on the district court, Jones served as a superior court judge in Athens, Clarke County, and Oconee County for 16 years. In his role, he presided over civil and criminal cases, as well as substance abuse treatment program. He served as the Athens, Clarke County Municipal Court Judge, Assistant District Attorney for the Western Judicial Circuit, and Director of the Athens Child Support Recovery Unit. Actually, this is so good, I think I probably will read it all. Jones has offered his time and leadership to numerous academic, community, legal, and social organizations. He is a managing trustee and secretary for the University of Georgia Foundation and a member of the University of Georgia Athletic Association Board. He's past president of the UGA Alumni Association. I was glad to serve on that board. And UGA chapter of the National Football Foundation and College Football Hall of Fame. He's a former chair of the University of Georgia School of Law's Board of Visitors. He's a member of the Old Warhorse Lawyers Club and the Lawyers Club of Atlanta, and former chair of the Georgia Judicial Qualifications Commission, the Athens Area Community Foundation. He served on the Georgia Supreme Court's Commission on Equality and Domestic Violence Committee. He's also president of the Joseph Henry Lumpkin American Inn of Court. He has also been named an honorary member of Blue Key Honor Society and fellow of the Lawyers Foundation in Georgia, and a Rotary Club Paul Harris Fellow, and he lives in Athens, right on the line of Athens and Oglethorpe County. I have to get that in. And he's married to Lillian Kinsey, who is a stellar leader in her own right. So please join me in welcoming Judge Steve Jones to Georgia College.
Well, let me say good afternoon, dear everyone. It is great to be here. Thank you, Jane, for introducing me. Jane and I have known each other for a lot of years, so we won't get into that. But I stand here today and tell you, I could not stand here today as United States District Court Judge with the help of my good friend, Jane Kidd. I've known her a lot of years, and thank you for the introduction. Your campus is beautiful. You all must not want to leave here after the end of 4 years. Probably want to come back for a couple more degrees. You have outstanding faculty. Dr. Harold Mark is just, you're great. You're just outstanding. And your president, Kathy Cox, again, I've known for a lot of years. She's the best. You all are fortunate to have Kathy Cox as your president because she cares about you. And she's been that way for all the years I've known her as Secretary of State, president of the colleges, deans. Her and Mark are close friends, so thank you for all you do for the state of Georgia. I'm also happy to see my good friend Jeannie here. She's somewhere. All right, there you go, okay. Well, she came all the way in to be with me today, and thank you, Jeannie. As judge, I've made a lot of decisions in life. And one of the best decisions I've ever made was when I asked my wife, Lillian, to marry me. And I got lucky, and she said yes. Being here today tells me a lot about what you're trying to do. About 31 years ago, Lily and I decided to build a house. And in building that house, I noticed that the contractor took more time with the foundation than any other aspect of the house. And being a lawyer and a judge and being paranoid, I thought they were cheating me. So I go up to the contractor and I said, what is this? Why are you taking so long to build this house? And he says, well, did you notice that we kept knocking down walls and digging holes? And I said, yeah. He said, well, let me tell you something, Judge. The most important part of your house is the foundation. Everything rests on that foundation. If the foundation's not right, the walls of your house will crack, the ceiling will fall in, your house will never be airtight, your house will never be straight if the foundation is not straight. I'm here today to tell you that the foundation for America is the law. And how strong that law is will depend on the people I'm looking at sitting out here in this audience. You will be the leaders that will determine whether that foundation will be strong, whether that foundation will hold us up through conflicts, whether that foundation will hold us up through disagreements. As leaders, you will determine whether that foundation provides freedom for everyone. But one other thing you will decide as leaders, you will be the lighthouses that will lead others to better lives through a stronger legal foundation. But in order to do that, in order to be great leaders, in order to lead others, you have to set a good example. And you can't have a strong legal foundation unless you have leaders that believe in respecting the rule of law and the courts. Now, I'm not standing here today, and I'm only going to talk to you about 10 minutes because I want to hear your questions. But it's important to understand as leaders and future leaders that you're not always going to agree with legal decisions, rulings, and opinions. But the true test of leadership is recognizing different opinions and different ideas. If you only go around and people that think the same way you think, you're not developing as a leader. What we look for and what I say to people every day in my courtroom, I want to know what you think. I want to hear what you have to say because that makes Steve Jones a better person. A good friend of mine, and your president knew him, Justice George Carlin. He served on the Georgia Supreme Court. There was 9 justices. And there was one justice that they just disagreed philosophically all the time. But yet they were great friends. So I asked him one day, I said, how does this work? That you all are great friends outside the court, but in the courtroom, your opinions are as far as the east from the west. And he looked at me and he said, Steve, if the Supreme Court had 9 people that all thought the same way, we would have a weak Supreme Court. We need people to think differently. We need different ideas. We need to develop different ideas. I'm messing up the mic. And what I say to you all today is that you can't respect the rule of law in the courts if you only agree with it when they decide things the way you like it. If you only say, I only will respect it during times when they do things to uplift what I feel about it, that's not leadership. Leadership realizes that there are people that have ideas as good as ideas you have. But also the importance of respecting the rule of law and respecting the courts is that your rights are protected by this way. Let me give you an example. How many of you all in here had to apply to come to Georgia College? I hope everybody did. Do you realize that the law helps set how your admissions can come to this college? How many of you all ever heard of Title IX? Realize that Title IX, as the president and the deans will tell you, play a major part in decision making? How many of you all have heard about the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504? Those are things that directly affect you every day. And you also realize that in your life as a college student, the requirements for graduating are set by laws. Why do I tell you this? Because what I want you to understand as future leaders and present leaders is that we have to be a nation that believe in the foundation of a strong law. But we also have to be a nation that understands that there are differences in the way we do things, but the law has an effect on us no matter how we do those things. And finally, 60 years ago, there were a group of judges in the Fifth Circuit of the United States. And there's a book, and I'm going to talk about the book, I'm sure you all want to ask me a question, called The Unlikely Heroes. And this is a book about 4 judges on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals of the United States that made up Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia, and Florida. And these judges grew up and were appointed to be judges by presidents from Kennedy to Eisenhower. And these 4 judges, there were 15 of them, but those 4 judges in particular, they all grew up in the South, in a segregated society. They were not in a diverse society like you all are today in ways whatsoever. But these judges were given a commission, a task, after the 1954 Supreme Court ruling of Brown versus the Board of Education for Topeka. They were given responsibility of integrating a whole section of America. And as they were doing this, they faced pushback. One of the judges, John Wisdom, one day he goes home, he goes to church with his family. And for years they had been sitting on the same bench, or the same pew in that church. And after he had ruled for John Meredith to attend Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi College, the first black to attend that college, he goes to church that following Sunday. And he's been going to that church for years, sitting on the same bench in the same pew for years. And he walks in that church, and there's friends that he's known and grown up with, played Little League football and Little League baseball, sitting on this pew. And he and his family walk into church, and they walk up to the pew to sit down, and neighbors they had known, friends he had known for 25 and 30 years, they get up and they leave. And for the rest of the time he attended that church, no one would sit on that pew or that bench with him. His dog was poisoned. Snakes were put in his yard. But you know what he did? He kept doing what he needed to do as judge. Another judge, John Reeves, loved to play golf. Once he ruled to integrate schools and swimming pools and housing in Alabama and Louisiana, Georgia. He had to have federal marshals walk with him on a private golf course to play golf. Albert Tuttle built one of the most famous people along. When he ruled and overruled Judge Boodle, a district court judge, that Charlene Hunter and Hamilton Holmes could be the first people to go to the University of Georgia, his life was turned upside down. But here's the point. They didn't change their ideals. They didn't change their rulings to be popular. Leadership sometimes calls for you to be out on that limb all by yourself. Your values can't change to try to make the majority happy. These are men that grew up in a segregated South, have been taught all the things that these laws will tell them different, but yet they adjusted. I'm on my 9th minute, I know Dr. Mark. And what I say to you all today is that as future leaders, you're going to be put in situations just like these 4 men. And you're going to have to make that decision. Do I change to be popular? Do I change to make the majority like me? Or do I do what's the right thing? So finally, let me say this to you. How well you do will determine how solid that foundation will be in America. How solid that legal law foundation will stand will depend on how you answer that question. And I'm ready to answer the questions you all have tonight. Thank you.
So, thank you, Judge, for those comments. We have some folks in the audience who I know are going to be asking some questions. And as we're getting started, students, I want to encourage you. You can use your telephone to ask questions and share with us. I'll help to relay them. As well, we have a microphone here that can make its way around the room to you all. If you want to ask a question using your telephone, there are frames on the center of the table that have this QR code. You can also scan the code that you see up there, or if you're not so good with the QR thing, like as I am not, you can type in curious.leadcreatively.org and enter that code that you see there to share your questions with us. With that said, Judge, thank you for your comments. Paige Blakemore, I know, has some questions, and we'd like to have a conversation with you that will be shaped by our audience here.
Well, thank you, Judge Jones, for being here this evening. It's an honor to have you on campus today.
Honor to be here.
I know that we're in a room full of college students today, and as a current college student myself, I was hoping you could touch on your educational background a little bit and maybe the mindset on leadership you had in your early 20s.
It's been a long time since I've seen the 20s, but I'll say anything. Grew up in Athens, Georgia. The first 4 years of my life, I attended segregated schools, and in the 5th grade, school starts integrating. I go to schools in Athens, Clark County. I go to Cedar Shoals High School there. Graduate from high school in Athens. Applied to go to the University of Georgia. It was a whole lot easier to get in the University of Georgia when I was trying than it is now. And then I got an undergraduate degree there. Did not go straight to law school. Worked a few years outside and then went back to law school. And I think it helped me to handle the discipline of law school. I think if I went straight to law school, I probably had more problems. Received my undergraduate degree from the University of Georgia and my Juris Doctorate. The one thing I learned that helped me in leadership, and I touched on it a little bit tonight, is that there are certain things in your life that you have to place values on. Certain things you're going to say, no, this is not open for negotiation, but you also have to be open-minded. And a leader can't be in a situation where their ideas are so concrete they don't want to listen to other people. As judge now, I've been a judge since 1993, excuse me. And I've had a lot of different law clerks come through, and it's surprising how law clerks think differently now than they did 15 years ago when I first started getting law clerks. And you have to adjust to it.
Absolutely. You said 1993?
1993, I'm an old man.
So over the course of your career, how would you say your perspective on the role of the judiciary has evolved? Because you've been at this for a while.
The judiciary has become more diverse. When I first became a judge, a majority of the people in the judiciary were men. And now it's maybe not 50-50, but there is more female judges. There are more judges coming in with different ideals, different backgrounds. When I first became a judge, most of the judges were people that were litigators, from prosecutors and maybe major law firms, and now you have public defenders, you have people that come in from smaller law firms, and that's good. It goes back to what Justice Carlin was telling me. The judiciary is only strong if we have diverse opinions, diverse ideas. You can understand things better. I have one colleague, she has really helped me because she has, her ideas, my ideas, not similar, okay? But she makes me think about her ideas. And so when I'm dealing with someone that might think more along the way she's thinking, I think I'm better at handling it now than I was when I met her.
Absolutely. I got the chance to read your Senate confirmation hearing, and I read this quote, and it really struck me. I'm going to read it to you.
Okay.
It said, "I think that as judge, it is my job to listen to the facts in the case and follow the law in rendering a reasonable sentence on one. And if you fail to do that, then you are not doing your job as a judge." I was wondering if you could say what case or legal issue has had the most significant impact on you personally or professionally?
Oh, that's a great question. 3 cases, really.
Okay.
The case that had the most impact on me probably is a case I handled when I first became a district court judge. It said there was a young man that had been charged with murder, killing members of his family, Cobb County, Georgia. And he had gone to trial, he was convicted, he had received the death penalty to be put to death. He goes through the whole process, appeal process in the Georgia courts, and then he comes over to the federal courts. His date for execution is like on a Tuesday of the following week. And I received the case that Monday. And you start thinking about it from the point of view of this is the ultimate decision you have to make. And that had an effect on me, even though he was arguing that the penalty phase in Georgia was cruel and unusual punishment. And we looked at it, myself and the 3 law clerks. We stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning working on it because we had to get it over. And we ruled not to stop the execution. But the effect it had on me is that judges was not as sometimes as strong as someone being executed, or maybe someone house is going to be. So we have a major effect on people's lives. And what it left me with is that we're not dealing with numbers. You have a file that you're dealing with human beings. You're dealing with their lives. You're dealing with not only their life, but the life of family members. And that you should never, ever, as a judge, take that lightly. No, every case is not someone set to be executed. But still, some people come to court for one time in their life. And that's the most important day or time in their life. And we cannot, as judges, minimize that. You can't say, well, I do this here every day. I've been a judge since 1993. But I'm happy to say that every case is an important case. There are no big cases and small cases, because they're all dealing with people. And that is the ultimate thing you have to remember. We're dealing with people in their lives.
So you said 3 cases.
Second case, I was Superior Court judge. Again, I get all these cases that keep people having hard times in life. A lady with 3 minor kids, and her husband was killed in a car accident in Athens, and we tried the case. And while the jurors were deliberating, the lawyers came to me and says, look, the other side's offered us a good amount of money. We think we need to take it. She doesn't want to take it. And will you talk to her? And then talking to her, she says, no, I think I'm just going to take my chances. But one thing you learn as a judge, when jurors come out of a jury room, if they refuse to look at one of the parties, in particular, the plaintiff's lawyers and the plaintiff always sits next to the jury. If they come out and they refuse to look at the plaintiff or the plaintiff's counsel, that's not good for the plaintiff. They came out of that room and there were tears in the eyes of a number of members. And I said to myself, this is not good, President Cox. They had offered her, she had sought $1 million, they had offered her $500,000, and guess how much the jury gave her? 0. Mother with 3 minor kids under 12 years old, deceased father. Again, the effect it had on me is just, this is affecting a life. She could have used that $500,000. The third case is a case I can't talk too much about because it's on appeal right now at the 11th Circuit. It's a redistricting case I handled like my whole life about 2 years ago. Once again, I had to make decisions with my staff on where you were going to vote, what part of Georgia you were going to vote, who you were going to get to vote for. And I never understood, as well as do now, how important it is for people placed in different parts and all the things you have to go through. Can't say any more of that because, again, it's on appeal, so I just leave it at that.
We don't want to get you in trouble.
No, I don't want to get in trouble.
We do have a question from the audience about, can you talk about the process of having to make a decision that you know is going to be unpopular, and how do you prepare for that, both yourself and communicating that to others? Well, what I do now, I have 3 law clerks that are assigned to me, I select. And what we always do on cases that we know, again, all cases are important, but you recognize some cases are going to be more publicized than others. You say, first of all, we're going to follow the law, no matter what it is. I mean, if it comes out this way, this is how we're going to rule. And I learned very quickly as judge, you can't tip your finger and say, okay, which way is the wind blowing? You can't make a decision based on what's popular or what the majority want. You have to say, we're going to follow the law. And if the law comes down this way, that's where we'll rule. And if it's not popular, well, it comes back to what I was saying a few minutes ago. You have to understand people have different ideas and different views. And if the public only likes the law when you rule the way they like or the way they want, you may be fine, but that's not the way it's supposed to go. Judges as independent, we have to make sure we base our decisions entirely on what the law is. So when I have a case that I got to rule on, and I've had cases that I've ruled on, and there are a lot of people not too happy with me, that comes with being a judge. But if you start trying to make rulings to fit a situation or to go the way you want or to make somebody happy, you're not doing your job as judge. Thank you.
The focus of our Usery forums is not only leadership for the public good, but also leadership that brings people together. And you were just describing some of these challenging times, and I was just wondering, how do you remain calm and composed in those situations while maintaining that focus on bringing people together?
You ever seen that commercials where it says, don't let them see you sweat? No. I'm probably calmer now, and Lillian will probably tell you this, than I was 25 years ago as a judge. I have a great wife because a lot of times she has to hear all my complaints. But to answer your question is that there's a sense of trying to do the right thing. How can I put this? You tell yourself, this is what I have to do. And that relieves pressure off you rather than trying to say, I got to make a decision to make somebody happy. You say, I'm going to make a decision and let the law lead me where I'm supposed to go. And for me, that takes pressure off of me because I've made decisions I weren't happy with, okay? So I go home and say, well, I really want to rule that way. But the pressure's off of me because I can say, I took an oath to follow the law, to follow the Constitution, and this is what we're going to do. And that way I can blame it on the law and the Constitution. So that makes it easier. But listen, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I still don't have stress, that I still don't worry about things that anybody that tells you that they receive public criticism doesn't bother them, then I'm not saying they're not telling you the truth, but they may not be true for themselves completely. Everybody wants to be liked. Everybody wants to be loved. But as a friend of mine told us, being judged, sometimes you got to give up some of that.
You used the phrase a couple of minutes ago, when somebody's in your courtroom, it is the most important day of their life. For you, it's probably a tension sometimes between remembering that and it being another day at work. In this audience, we have a lot of, if you couldn't tell, nursing students,
Yes,
soon to be nurses. And for them, it could just be another day at work. But for the patients they're working with, it is definitely the most important day of their life. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about how you maintain the importance of that without forgetting that it is that for the people you're serving.
I think what I try to do is I'm always afraid of not doing my best. And one of the things that I was taught in life is that you always say thank you, you never take anybody anything for granted, and you always give your best. So when I go in the courtroom, I'm still somewhat nervous, afraid that I'm not giving my best for that person. For a nurse, again, it may be surgery, and then you may be doing open heart surgery, or you may be just taking, no, that was just taking blood out of someone, but taking blood from someone. But you always got to keep in mind, give your best. And that way, you're just as much involved in the case was involved with someone giving a $2.5 billion verdict, or when they're giving a verdict for $1,000. That's where I approach it. I'm always trying to give my best. And I'm always afraid when I don't do it. And one thing I developed over the years, I always critique every decision I make after I make it at home.
You're your own worst critic?
Yes. Because you want to do better. I'll go home tonight after I leave here, and I will critique everything I said. And say, what did I say could have been better? What could I have done to have been better to page to ask questions? And so if I go home and I say, Dr. Harold Mark was standing in front of me in court, and I didn't pay as much attention to him as I should have, I got to do better.
What would you say are some practices and skills that you've learned or developed to kind of do your best or transcend difference with people?
What skills? Listening. Now, let me tell you that I don't listen as well as I should. But I think the best skill I've learned is to listen to what people are saying. Let me tell you what I mean by that. I'm guilty sometimes of being able to look right at you and not be paying attention to what you're saying. But I'm learning you can't do that. You have to listen to every word that's being said and take it in and make sure you're interpreting it the right way. And that comes from, again, listening. And the second thing I've tried to become better at is communication. Lawyers sometimes, I hate to admit this, we talk too much. But sometimes we say a lot.
Professors do that, though.
No, not professors. But sometimes when we're talking a lot, we're not communicating. Everybody comes to court comes in different ways, with different means, different backgrounds. And you as judge have to very quickly assess that and meet them at where they are. The way I might deal with Dr. Harold Mark may be a little bit different, because I have to meet you at your level, and you have to make sure you're communicating to that person not talking down on that person or talking at that person, but talking with that person. In order to do that, you got to be willing to say, hey, this person's important. Everybody's important. And when you do that, you make the effort. That's the word I want. You make the effort to communicate. And I try to develop better communication skills and better listening skills.
That's good advice for all of us, I think, whether these students are going into nursing or education or wherever it is that they may be going. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more specifically about some of these folks in the room who might want to take a path similar to you, who may be thinking about law school. What advice would you give them if that is a path that's of interest to them?
Well, I have some bias. I think being a lawyer is a great profession. I think one thing you have to ask yourself if you want to go to law school is, are you willing to take the time to do all the reading that you will have to do? Are you willing to do? Law is a difficult profession because it's not, in math, 2 + 2 is 4 every time, right? But sometimes 2 + 2 is not 4 in the law. There are gray areas in the law. Once again, one question Layton always said to me, can you just give me a yes or no answer? That's not possible. But in the law, you have to develop that kind of thinking process. You can't say it's got to be, you have to be flexible in your thinking and the way you approach things. It's a judge told me one time, a judge by the name of James Barrow, he says, the law is like water. It's constantly moving and changing. If you're going to be in the law, you have to be prepared to do that. Be prepared to have an open mind, and more importantly than anything else is that you got to like being around people. Some people say, well, if I'm going to be a corporate lawyer, you still got to be around people.
Could you talk a little bit more about the transition from being an attorney to being a judge? We've gotten a couple of questions from this group about that. Maybe talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you and how you knew that that was the path that you would take.
Well, that's a good question because I did not start off wanting to be a judge. I wanted to be a litigator. I wanted to go to a district attorney's office or a public defender's office, work about 3 to 5 years, learn how to try cases very well, and hopefully some law firm would hire me and I would go out and try cases all over America. And then I got offered a chance to be a municipal court judge. As a lawyer, I was an advocate for a position. Assistant district attorney, I was an advocate for the state of Georgia in the case I was prosecuting. And I knew the other side's point of view, but as judge, you're not an advocate for the plaintiff or the defendant or for the prosecution, you're neutral. And that's a little bit difficult when you're taking off that advocacy hat and putting on a neutral hat. Judges don't have the luxury of throwing up an idea and says, okay, you decide what to do. As Harry Truman said, the buck stops with the judge. So the difficulty for me moving from being a lawyer to being a judge is being advocating one position other than having to make sure I look at both positions in a neutral and fair way.
I got my first summons for jury duty a couple of days ago, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the importance of those of us who may be serving in that capacity. That's in the future for all these folks. What does that look like?
That's one of the greatest honors you can have is to be summoned to jury. Let me say that one more time. One of the greatest honors you can have, there are people on the other side laughing, is to be summoned to jury. Let me tell you why. Your rights are protected because you have a right to have a people out of the community decide for you. 2006, I was invited to go to a number of countries in the Middle East. I spent 21 days to Israel, Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, and I looked at their justice system. You know what stood out to me? You know what stood out among all the things? There was nobody in the public deciding people's freedom and property rights. There was somebody appointed by the king or council to decide this. They had no relationships whatsoever to the person standing in front of them. There was no one there sitting in that jury box and saying, I can relate to that person. Or at the thin of that plane can say, I get to pick the person that can help decide where I get to keep my property or when I go to prison for many years. Serving on jury is such a great right. It's one of our best freedoms. Having jurors make the decision. Having jurors look at it. But also it's important because what happens one day when you're sitting at that plaintiff's table or you're sitting at the defense table? You're going to want people out of the community that come in with fair and open minds decide your opinion. You're not going to want somebody that has no contact, no idea whatsoever about your life, where you come from, just being paid to carry one way or the other. You're going to want someone that can relate to you. So that's why I served on jury. God, you got me excited now. It's great. I have a jury trial starting tomorrow. I won't sleep tonight because I get excited about it. Why? It's a great, great freedom that we have that we shouldn't take for granted. Because once you lose it, it's hard to get it back.
I wonder if you could speak. We've gotten a question, too, about the resilience of the judiciary. You talked a little bit about how it's changed. Given what you just said about how exciting a jury service can be, could you talk a little bit about the resilience of the American judiciary?
1789, the Judicial Practice Act was passed by Congress, probably one of the first things Congress did in 1789. It created the judiciary, the federal judiciary as we know it now. And at that time, over the years, Bill of Rights, amendments, laws were passed. But if you go back and you look at what they passed in 1789 and what we have today, that's resilience. If you go back and look at how Chief Justice John Marshall in 1803 said, it is emphatically the role and the duty of the judiciary to interpret it and interpret what the law is. 1803. Still today, Chief Justice John Roberts on 8 other justices are doing exactly that. Yeah, there's been times during the years that we had to modify it, amend it, but the judiciary in America is not perfect. The law in America is not perfect. But when you compare it to what we have been able to do over 250 years, there's resiliency. And here's the reason why that's so important. Things that change a lot are not stable. People don't have confidence in that. The public has confidence when the law is stable, applied equally and fairly. Not just the same way in 2025, but the same way in 2005. How it's changed? More diversity.
Thank you.
You were talking about a little bit in the past, but I wanted to look a little bit into the future. What do you believe are the most pressing issues facing the federal judiciary, maybe in the next decade or so?
I think we have to make sure the judiciary does not have an army that work for us. The FBI, the Secret Service, the Marshals, the CIA, the ATF, they work for the executive branch. So when I enter an order, I'm depending on really the executive branch to enforce it. But more importantly, I'm depending on the public to follow it. What concerns me, and I spoke about it a little bit here, is that we have to have a public that understands that the law is always not going to come out the way they want it to be. But we still have to have public confidence in what judges do. Let me give you an example. 5'11", 160 pounds after 8 meals, okay? This is not a physique that's going to scare anybody, okay? All right? But on my signature, multi-billion-dollar corporations have to stop doing what they're doing. On my signature, voting patterns can change. On my signature, governments can be stopped from doing things they do, not because they are afraid of me physically. It's because of respect for the rule of law and the courts and the confidence. I'm a little bit concerned that maybe sometimes we're forgetting that when rulings come down that we don't like. Get involved. 1896, the case called Plessy versus Ferguson was issued. This is a case that says that black and white individuals could go to separate places as long as it's equal. That was the law of the land in America for 58 years until Brown versus the Brown Board of Education versus Topeka that said that was wrong. In roughly early 2000s, there was a case called Gore versus Bush. The Supreme Court decided the counting of votes had to stop and that George W. Bush more or less would be the president. Al Gore, who was the vice president and the other person, came out and says, I accept. Now, I'll be willing to bet you to this day, Al Gore does not agree with that ruling. But his respect for the process, his respect for the courts, his respect for the rule of law, he says, that's it. There was no revolution in America. There was no overthrowing of America. There were no tanks in the street to stop people. There were a lot of people didn't like the ruling, didn't agree with the ruling. But the respect for the rule of law, the respect for the process, the respect for the court, they said, that's going to do it. We have to make sure that continues.
So we just got a question from the audience about what determines whether or not the public has confidence in the courts.
You have to get involved and understand the process to have confidence. You have to, the public has responsibility of learning the process. In other words, yeah, there are cases that people disagree with, and it's going to continue. But you have to understand that what happens if the court rules the way you like, and if someone else don't like it, and they try to change it, overthrow it, whatever. You have to have confidence in it, and you can't have confidence in something that you don't understand. But you have a responsibility as a citizen to learn the process. In other words, there's no sense that former President Theodore Roosevelt says, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. You have to care enough to learn about the process. And that way you can have confidence in it. If you don't understand it, I admit it's hard to have confidence in it. The public people leave sometimes saying, well, we were cheated, or we were done right. After a jury trial, and that's at the court in the street, and there's 12 of their peers made a decided decision. But they sometimes don't understand it, not intentionally, but that's how you have confidence in the decision. I'm not saying you got to agree with every decision. And I'm not saying Plessy versus Ferguson shows that sometimes decisions may not be right on point and there has to be adjustments later. But you can't go and just say, we're going to change it every time you don't agree. Not a good answer, because my answer really said you have to learn and understand and seek to learn the process to have confidence in it. I don't know. The person said that in the process, he didn't answer the question.
It sounds like you're saying the public has to try as hard as the courts have to try.
Yes.
That we have to learn, we have to understand, we have to stay engaged. We have to activate our subscriptions to the New York Times and read the newspaper every day. That it's not a one-sided proposition.
Yeah, I once had an individual come to me and ask me why I sentenced the person the way I did sentence the person. And my answer was simple. The law had a set mandatory minimum sentence that I had to give. Once I explained that to her, she says, oh, so you had no choice. She was mad at me. You're too hard. You're too harsh. I said, well, the General Assembly, or the legislature, or the Congress sets the sentence and the penalty. And they said, this is the sentence you receive for this case. There's a case I handled that former Secretary Cox will relate to. In Georgia, we have runoff elections. Oh, we used to have runoff elections. We have something that President Cox and I told them to do years ago. They do ranking. I had to enter an order that says, okay, if you're going to have runoff elections, in between the runoff elections, you're going to have 45 days between them. Oh, people went crazy. But what they didn't realize, that's what Congress had passed. Learning the process and understanding the process. They were mad at the court, me, for saying you have to have 45 days between runoff elections, when Congress had passed a law that says that's what it's going to be. Understanding enough, you have a responsibility to. Did I get that right, President?
As college students and understanding the process, where would you say is the best place to get involved? Where's the best place to start?
There's a lot of good places. I think you all have an excellent way to get started right here. Get involved in your college. You know, when I look to hire someone to be a law clerk, I want to see that they do something other than go to the library and study every day. Do they get involved in organizations on campus? Are they involved in moot court, mock trial? Are they involved in the financial club? You start here, right here on campus, getting involved in organizations and doing things that get you in, not so much in the public eye, but get you in a situation where you're seeing what the public is doing. I had no problem when I was in high school going to the county commission meetings. Now I know, I had a boring life, okay? But I learned so much about government that was not in a textbook. You have to go and do things like that. You have to force yourself sometimes to get involved in things that you may not be interested in, but that you need to know.
Speaking about going where there is no textbook, we've gotten a couple of questions about AI and the role of AI in the practice of the law. Could you speak a little bit about that?
AI in the law right now, we don't have a set way of handling it right now. It's so new to us because in a meeting I had with some judges the other day, we were trying to say, how do we handle it when a pro se person or a person representing themselves use AI? And I've only had one person use AI, and you can tell because the cases, they had nothing to do with the motion that they was filing. But now, there are lawyers and judges who may disagree with me, but right now I don't think the legal system has come up with a way to handle AI. Because when I hire somebody to be a law clerk, I don't know whether the person wrote the brief that I'm reading or did they get it through AI. But here's a question also. AI can also be very helpful. We have a thing in the law called discovery, where you're getting information material from each side. AI can be very helpful in getting up this material and getting it in a timely way. AI can be very helpful in research if you do it the right way. But AI, I don't think it's meant, and this is Steve Jones' personal opinion, it's meant to do your work for you. If you're writing the brief, you should write the brief and AI should not. If I'm preparing an order, I should prepare the order. I may use AI, I don't use it now, I may never use it, to help me research and find the cases, but before it's making that decision, it should be mine.
I'm afraid we're almost out of time, but two questions we always like to ask. One is if you could talk about the most important book you've ever read.
I mentioned a few minutes ago, it's called Unlikely Heroes. I've read that book twice. Again, the book is called Unlikely Heroes, and it's about judges on the old Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And again, old Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals was made up of Texas, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, and Florida. And there was 4 judges in particular that we talk about in that book. And what that book was so good because, to me, that book showed leadership and courage. These 2 quick points. 4 of these people, again, were raised up in a different environment, and they were asked to go in there and make decisions that was completely different than the environment they grew up in. And they had to do it in an environment that caused them to lose friendships, church acquaintances. But John Minor Wisdom and Albert Tuttle and John Reeves, and I'm getting to Judge Brown's first name, they did it. They stood by and did what they were supposed to do. And they knew as they made these decisions, it wasn't going to be popular. As judge, I had a case a couple years ago. It was hard, and I went back and read the book again. It was like motivational for me. Anybody wants to go to law school, you need to read that book. Unlikely Heroes.
Unlikely Heroes. The second question we often like to ask our Usery Forum presenters, if you could go back and tell your 20-year-old self something, what advice would you like to give your 20-year-old self?
Quit making bad decisions. I would tell my 20-year-old self this: don't place limitations on yourself, and don't allow other people to place limitations on you. I've always tried to do some things, but some things I probably did not do because I listened to somebody and said, oh, you can't do that. Or I would say to myself, I'd like to do that, but I don't think I can. And I missed out on it. And as I got older, I recognized you got to try it. What's the worst that can happen to you? And that's why I say to the 20-year-old Steve and to the 20-year-olds here, don't place limitations on yourself, and more importantly, do not allow other people to place limitations on you.
That could be good advice at any age, though, couldn't it?
It helps me now. Of course, when it comes to eating cooked spinach, I place limitations on myself.
Well, please join me in thanking Judge Steve Jones for his time and his insight.
Thank you all.
We just want to encourage you, if you have not already, take a look at our must-reads of 2025. You can scan that QR code or go to mustreads.leadcreatively.org and download. We've got 12 books that we think you should take a look at this year to help empower you in your leadership across the year 2025. 6 of them have virtual book clubs associated with them, so we invite you to download that. Take a look. I challenge you, pick a book that you want to read. Choose some people in this room, and maybe you can read it together. Unlikely Heroes might need to make the list for 2026.
I highly recommend it.
So please take a look at that, mustreads.leadcreatively.org. I also want to just share with you a couple of upcoming special events. 2 in our series of our virtual book club. The first is a book called The Middle Daughter, written by a Georgia College professor, my friend Chico Unigwe. That will be at the end of March 27th, that virtual book club. Our Leadership Ideas Festival is Friday, April 11th here, and the second in our virtual book club for 2025 is an excellent book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, facilitated by Dr. Mikkel Christensen, and that will be Wednesday, April 30th. So 2 in our virtual book club series. We invite you to join us there. If there's anything that you learned today or that Judge Jones shared with you that you'd like to put on social media, we encourage you to use the hashtag for the public good. Also, please tag us using the handle Lead Creatively on Instagram and on LinkedIn. We're on YouTube as well. But I want to thank you all for joining us, for your excellent questions. And please join me again in thanking our distinguished presenter, the Honorable Steve Jones.
Thank you.